Is a draft cross-examination of a Crown expert by a defense lawyer with possible answers by the Crown witness. The defense wishes to establish that the international standard OIML R126 mandates maximum permissible error, what is sometimes called MPE. This is a sample cross-examination of a Center of Forensic Sciences expert specifically on OIML standard R126, the 2012 version. And it's about maximum permissible error in evidentiary breath instruments, the new ones and after repair. When this draft cross-examination was attempted in court, the cross-examiner erred in his calculations of MPE, as indicated by the OIML. The error was mathematical, entirely the fault of the cross-examiner, in thinking that the R126 MPE standard was drafted as blood rather than breath. But the standard is drafted in terms of breath, so a cross-examiner needs to be very, very cautious in the calculations that they put to the Crown expert. The purposes of the cross-examination include, first, to identify that the international standard for MPE for instruments in service, which is 6 milligrams per 100 mils at a target of 100 mils, is much tighter than the 10 milligram percent that's being used by police in Ontario. Secondly, another purpose is to identify that the international standard for MPE for instruments after repair is tighter than for instruments on a day-to-day basis in service. And thirdly, to raise the concept of MPE after repair and in service at various target values across the measuring interval. In the international literature, you will see a lot of reference to the taking of measurements across the measuring interval, and that's an important concept for defense lawyers to have under their belt. Question. Now, on the last day, I was having some difficulty in asking my questions of you, and I think that perhaps you thought that what I was doing was suggesting that item 5.2.2 in R126 requires control checks at a variety of different levels and an instrument response checking error at each of those. But rather, what I wanted to ask you was, if you look at item 5.2.2 on page 10, that it varies the required maximum permissible error depending on the concentration that is used for a control check, for an inspection, and for a verification. Anytime a control check is used in that kind of context. Answer, yes. Question, so that variation is across 0 to 200 milligrams per 100 mils. If we look at 5.1 in R126, but an upper limit might be defined by the manufacturer. Answer, yes. Question, so that in this particular case, because we're dealing with the Intoxilizer 8000C in Ontario, the manufacturer defines its upper limit in its manufacturer's specifications as 600 milligrams per 100 mils. Answer, for testing purposes, yes, yes. That's the range that it can measure. The actual blood alcohol concentration as opposed to the assessment range. Question, yes. The measuring interval. Answer, correct. Question, and so I take it then that your understanding of the concept of maximum permissible error in the OIML document is that when an instrument is being inspected, an instrument, specifically an instrument being in service under 5.2.2, the expectation is that the results of control tests are going to be within the maximum permissible error under 5.2.2. Is that how you read 5.2.2? Answer, all right. Could you repeat that now? Question. Under 5.2.2, my suggestion is that if, as you read it, the expectation is that the response of the instrument is to using a control solution at whatever concentration it is, the maximum permissible error for an instrument in service would be the numbers that are indicated there. And it's a calculation under each case, under 5.2.2. Answer. So as I read it here, 5.2.1 deals, or 5.2, relates to the operating condition as opposed to service. Are you referring to trying to get like when the instrument is sent to service, to the manufacturer, where they're having to restore it to original specifications? Or are you talking about operational parameters when the instrument's being used for testing in the field? Question. All right. Under 5.2, it indicates that the following MPEs apply within the rated operating conditions. Answer. Yes. Question. Which are specified in 5.2.1 talks about when an instrument is being submitted for type approval or initial verification or verification after repair. Answer. Correct. Question. Item 5.2.2 refers to breath alcohol analyzers in service. Answer. In service. Correct. Yes. Question. So in terms of the actual numbers, the expectation is, and I think we used, there's exhibit number 34, and exhibit number 34 would be a chart that the defense would provide to the expert showing a calculation, an actual mathematical calculation at various target values. Here's a copy. Yes, that's exhibit 34. You indicated that you thought my calculations were correct there. The expectation is that for an instrument that is in service, that if it is tested at 40 milligrams per 100 mils, then the expectation is that it will be within plus or minus 6 milligrams per 100 mils. If it's tested at 50, it would be within plus or minus 6 milligrams per 100 mils. But if it's tested at 100, it would be within plus or minus, you can read it for yourself on the chart. In the first version of the chart that I put to the witness, when I attempted this in court, I put a calculation at 7.5%. Question. All right, the 5.3 indicates that a measured value to 3 decimal places is truncated down to 2 decimal places. That's in 7.5. Answer, yes. Now, obviously, when you're putting together this kind of cross-examination, you have to have all of these numbers at your fingertips. And you have to get the numbers correct, and you need to review them with your own expert in advance of putting them to the witness. Otherwise, you can run into some difficulty the way that I did. Because it is sometimes difficult to figure out exactly what the OIML is talking about, because some of their numbers are indicated in terms of calculations of breath alcohol concentration rather than blood alcohol concentration. And so you have to translate appropriately. But it's important to realize that MPE, or maximum permissible error, is a concept that can be found throughout the international metrology literature. In other words, throughout international measurement science. The point is that it needs to be considered as being a different amount. The MPE needs to be considered as being at a different value within the measuring interval, across the measuring interval. So an error of 12 milligrams per 100 mils at a 40 target value is much more serious to linearity than an error of 12 milligrams per 100 mils at a 300 target value.